Thank you for that. I think I'm just going to go through a presentation today. It's not going to be a presentation entirely about kind of why Wealthtime is the right platform, or I'll leave that to Gareth and the team overall around the country. But really, the focus of this session is really on, I think, future-proofing your business, and I think really the kind of really crucial part thing for me is this idea of navigating the evolving platform landscape, because I think the platform landscape is changing. I mean, it's hardly a day goes by where there's more news happening in the platform market. There was some more information yesterday, I think, with FNZ looking to outsource some of their operational parts for nucleus, and I think it was Aberdeen. There's a lot of news happening continually within this space, and I think that means it's important for advisors to be able to kind of look through some of the noise of that, and go through the detail of understanding what's the right kind of long-term platform partner for the future. So I start with the kind of, when I talk about the platforms a lot, I think one of the most important things is really to understand what a platform actually is. So I think often people, we see the platform as a way of kind of trading assets and structuring kind of client portfolios. But I think what's really important is how platforms are structured overall. And I'm in a privileged position that obviously I'm a commercial director at Wealthtime, but also, I have also set up a platform myself from scratch. So I think it's important to think about the kind of three component parts that make up a platform. So if we kind of look at these three component parts, what you got here is kind of what I call the custody and trading core. That's the bit that everybody knows about. This is the kind of the bit that has to work. So this is, well, it all has to work, but ultimately this is kind of payments, settlements, all of those really crucial parts that's complex, that is the driving force behind kind of a platform. Investments have to be settled. It needs to work. So that's kind of the first element to it. So the custody, trading, settlement core is on the one side. The other side of that is, but a lot of those custody, trade, and execution platforms don't have kind of the functionality that one would typically need for an advice business. There are additional things you'd need, from kind of reports for clients, client portals, and so on. And they typically tend to get built within the technology interface element of it. So you think about a platform, we've got custody, trading, execution, and settlement on the one side. We also need an interface within that as well. So that would be all the additional tools and support services around that. But then also the other third component part of the platform is in fact the kind of customer service, the running of a platform, and the compliance responsibility for doing so. So if you think about those three components of the platform, they all kind of work together. So essentially, it doesn't matter which platform provider you are in the marketplace, these are the three component parts you need to think about. And again, throughout the whole marketplace as a whole, what we see is we've got, if you use Wealthtime as an example, prior to recent times, what would the custody, trading, core, execution, and settlement would be GBST. The technology interface is proprietary technology. That is, the people that build that interface technology, and the operational part are in fact employees of the group. And then thirdly, the responsibility for running the platform, the pricing, the customer service, compliance and regulatory aspects is run by Wealthtime. So if you think there's kind of component parts there, but this is different across the marketplace as a whole. You see some platforms where they have all three component parts are built themselves. That's one element to it. You also see other ones where some use a partner for potentially FNZ for the custody, trading, execution, and settlement, and then they would build the interface themselves. Some would use FNZ or GBST to build some of the interface technology and also some of the back office. Some would build client interface themselves. Some might use a company like Seckle, build the interface themselves, and then be responsible for the client service. It really is kind of, a complicated kind of interface between all three of those, and it varies across the marketplace. And understanding who's responsible for what inside each of the platform providers that you select is really, really important. So because there are kind of some challenges that have faced platform market as a whole, what we've seen is kind of a slow, I would argue, in the sector as a whole, kind of a slow pace of innovation within the marketplace. And this is for a very particular reason. A lot of people are less familiar with this But essentially, if you outsource your custody, trade, and execute and settlement, what actually happens is there are kind of, to make sure that stays at the leading edge of technology, what you tend to see is, the business model is really to kind of, every time you get an upgrade in the platform on that custody, trade, and execution settlement, what you have to do is pay for that. That's how it works. You need to pay a large sums of money, sometimes in the case of millions, to be able to upgrade that kind of core trading functionality. And it's important you stay as close as possible, to the latest iterations of technology, because obviously things can change and regulations change and so on. So that's the kind of the first element to it. That costs potentially millions to do that. But of course, you could invest in that. But if your technology interface cannot link to that, essentially it's kind of wasted money, because you need to make sure both parts of that are interacting. So again, potentially that expense of upgrading the systems, whether you went externally or you could proprietary build yourself, that again can also run into the millions. So essentially what we're seeing is any form of improvement overall of the core trade and execution settlement, to continually keep that at the edge, cost millions. And at the same time, the interface technology can also cost millions. And then the third element to it, of course, is you then have to make sure the customer service and the client service is as good as possible overall. So what tends to happen is, it has happened over the years, is that what you typically tend to do is, as the as prices are coming down, because all advisors want lower costs. So what we're seeing is we want platform improvements, we want technology evolution, we want to make sure the interface improves, and we also want the cost to come down. And I think this is where kind of some of the tension is in the marketplace as a whole. We're seeing a number of companies either sacrifice people in the customer service teams, because of the tech improvements, or a belief in the tech improvements. We've also seen kind of slow development, or not going with the latest versions of each technology, to make sure the cost is allocated in the right areas. So what we're tending to see is this tension, whereby what we're not seeing is kind of the continual improvements we want to do, because people are having to make financial decisions along the way. Essentially, when people want to invest in the tech and lower and as advisors, quite rightly, you want to get continually lower costs. What we're seeing here is a tension, and the kind of the improvement in technology is slower than we'd like in the marketplace. And I think there's a way that we believe that there's another way of kind of looking at this. So I guess we're really starting now. Hopefully that explains really how platforms work and some of the kind of tensions you'll see overall. So just to summarize really on this particular slide, is really this idea of how do we ensure with the best client service possible, we make sure that technology interface continually improves, and we make sure we're continually on the latest iterations of what's happening in the custody, trading, settlement, and execution sphere. So I guess what are the options for everybody? So I think this is quite important. I've broken those kind of three areas down, but actually when you look into it, I'll probably want to explain what the options are for people within it. So if you look at currently, if you use Wealthtime as an example, the GBST is a core trading, execution, and settlement system. As I mentioned earlier, proprietary was until recently, the proprietary tech was built by Wealthtime itself, and there was customer service and client service teams based in Bath. So what you could also have done, you could potentially use FNZ as the kind of as the custody, trading, execution, settlement, and potentially some of the interface piece. But what we've seen recently is it came out in the press yesterday, as I've alluded to, is there are kind of changes within this tension, changes within the marketplace to decide, for people to decide what should we do regarding the technology interface, and the back office system. So what we're seeing is that's another option. People can then outsource one component part to FNZ, and then different parts could build the tech themselves. What we're seeing a lot of as well is a proliferation of kind of custody providers. So lots of the larger custody providers like SECL or SEI are in the marketplace, where they'll offer that core trading engine, and it's up to you to kind of build that kind of interface technology within that, or the platform provider. So what you then is look at these component parts to think about, and then what you've also got is kind of proprietary tech. People are taking responsibility for building all three component parts themselves, Okay, and the kind of pros and cons, of each of those. If you were to look at it separately, what you're seeing is from a proprietary tech perspective, what's important is you hold the tech stack and you have that all in one place. The challenge is how to make sure you make as much profit as possible in the long term, and make sure that you have the right client service teams behind it. From a custody provider element, what's really great there, it's a benefit, is that you have that. You have these kind of siloed parts where you're the one part, the custody trading execution settlement, the next part, the interface, and so on. And then also customer service separate to that, and you can kind of decide how that's constructed overall. And again, what I'll start to do is kind of talk, particularly in this example, about how Wealthtime approach this, which I think is a very different approach to the marketplace. But I think it's what you're starting to see is this. I think will become kind of the direction, and the story I mentioned earlier about with platform news is really that I think this is starting to be kind of the direction that most people will be going in. So if you look at this overall, what the partnership at Wealthtime is slightly different. So I mentioned to you earlier, historically, the kind of the interface technology was responsibility of Wealthtime, in-house, proprietary team. What actually has happened is we've recently signed a platform deal with a company called Wipro. So Wealthtime is the platform, the trading entity responsible for all the regulatory responsibility, the customer service. Our customer service team is based in Bath. And the kind of ongoing strategy and future direction of business, pricing, etc. But what we saw as an opportunity to do is outsource to a company called Wipro. So what Wipro is a business processing outsourced partner, but we partnered with Wipro, who have a relationship with GBST. So GBST remains the core trading functionality for the platform, but what we have done now is build kind of interface and agreement with Wipro that they take responsibility for the interface and operational aspects. So why is this kind of interesting? And again, it's a question, not to say this is the right or wrong answer, but this is something to think about when you're kind of exploring your platform providers. So if we look at, the Wipro deal as it looks today, is that there is a 10-year agreement in place. So Wealthtime has outsourced the platform interface technology to Wipro. And as a result of that, there is a 10-year agreement in place to ensure that Wealthtime, it's a 10-year agreement, but there's also a 10-year agreement in place to make sure that GBST, the latest version of GBST technology, is what's made available. And they typically upgrade that once a year. So that's 10 years of upgrades that have already been agreed, essentially paid for in the structure overall of the deal. So essentially what we have here for Wealthtime is the confidence that the latest technology will be available at a custody trading execution and settlement level for the next 10 years. So this makes a big difference in the marketplace. So that's something that those things need to be amended, adjusted. That's all factored into the way the platforms develops going forward. So it gives more certainty for both Wealthtime as a platform, but you as the users of that platform. And essentially what we've then said is Wipro are a huge company, hundreds of thousands of kind of employees all over the world. They've also got some significant clients like Disney or Amazon, John Lewis, Google, Microsoft, these companies. And really their specialism is to make sure that the tech syncs. Essentially what we're saying is, can we make sure this works as efficiently as possible? So the real strength here will be is that interface technology improves between Wipro and GBST, or the background technology. What we're going to see is continual improvement on online journeys. So we all want to make sure. I think the biggest challenge in the marketplace is when mistakes happen and/or when the technology breaks down for kind of manual intervention. So what we want to do is make sure the online journeys are as across the board are as slick and as smooth as possible, so that technology just works. And I think what's quite exciting is that's the expertise of Wipro. So what we're doing here is combining kind of the knowledge of Wealthtime, of running a platform, run a successful platform, making sure we provide great customer service, making sure the queries are responded to in the right way, as well as the right pricing levels, make sure it's run compliantly and efficiently. That's the expertise we have at Wealthtime. Wipro are a specialist in kind of outsourcing and making sure the interface technology improves. And again, some of those clients you see there, the requirement there is huge, and of course we want to make sure we're on the latest version of GBST technology, and that's part of this agreement overall. So when you think about Wipro spent £1 billion last year just on AI alone. So you think about the potential impacts of that, and the the ability for them to share skill and knowledge from across different marketplaces can only serve to enhance the platform overall. So essentially what we're saying here is, this is one way to look at it. We've outsourced the interface technology. GBST remains the trading, custody, execution, and settlement. But to make sure there's a long-term future and long-term viability, there's a 10-year agreement in place, to make sure that that this continues to evolve. And I think this is probably one of the things when you're thinking about selecting a platform in this kind of ever-evolving market landscape, is to make sure you think about these kind of three component parts and ask people, the providers, how these kind of areas are being addressed. So what are the things to really focus on and look out for? I think for me, it's this idea of continuous improvement. Now, I'm not going to go through kind of all of these line by line, but essentially continuous improvement is what we're looking for. So as I mentioned earlier, if the tech's working but the price keeps coming down, the tech, you need to invest in the tech but the price is coming down, there needs to be some sacrifices somewhere. If the interface technology, there's if costs are continually coming down and margins are becoming smaller, that means the decisions have to be made about where you spend your money. So if you spend your money on developing the custody, trade, and execution settlement, that potentially comes at a cost of less money available for the interface and less money for customer service. And I guess I'm not saying that's the answer, but essentially those decisions are going to have to be made across each area. So what's really important is you're focused on kind of a long-term profitable business, and making sure that there is a demonstrable example of continual improvements throughout the year. It shouldn't be one-off hits. It should be continual improvements, because this technology is evolving. And I think even the regulatory changes that happen, obviously we have a new budget coming up soon, but the impact of those regulatory changes will then have to be played through into the platform, which involves development time, both from the interface technology but also from the custody, execution, and settlement, all of which needs to be paid for. So I think what's important is you ensure that you're kind of looking for a platform that is to be able to demonstrate continual improvement over an extended period of time. And I think that's an example here. So here's an example, but again, I think it's important to ask all providers, when you're kind of navigating this marketplace, what is the roadmap? What are the roadmap? What has happened, which is really important. What improvements have you made, but also what improvements do you continue to make, and what plans do you have going forward? Also, it's really important to understand kind of the range of tools available. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but the range of tools available. So if you think about, already mentioned the improvements that are being made, but also what tools are available today, because I think what's important is how the platform supports you within your business in different ways. And again, we've got lots of different back office integrations. There are kind of client investor zones or report zones, how you can run models, can you scan platforms, are you able to make online submissions, and so on. And I think all of these things are in there. And I think what's important when you're making those decisions is really looking in detail at the tools. And again, for example, one of the most popular, didn't appear on this particular slide, but one of the most popular tools Wealthtime have is a capital gains tax calculator tool, which again, Gareth, Lou, and the team across the country will be able to demonstrate to you as well, which I think is a very, very important part of the process. So I guess in conclusion, what I really sort of think is important to think about is the support you get kind of overall. So if you think about a lot of people are reducing the teams that interact with you. Again, one of the core parts of Wealthtime is to make sure we have teams of people. So here on this particular, it's Gareth and Lou, but there's a wider team of face-to-face consultants, telephone-based consultants, key account managers. There's a whole team of people behind that can be dedicated to your businesses. So there's a really important people element of this, which I think is really important and often kind of underestimated, is that kind of relationship. So I think when you're making that decision, really important to think about kind of the people and the face-to-face interaction and so on. And again, we've seen a lot over the recent times that the continual commitment to that from Wealthtime is paying dividends in client relationships. Second thing to think about is really, the long-term kind of viability of the business. Can we ensure that the platform is as profitable as possible from all the component parts? and what is the plan for kind of development for both the interface technology and the custody, trading, execution, and settlement part. Because what's really important to future-proof you and your business, what's really important is that the technology and it improves. It's important that the people around it continue to improve, but it's important that you have confidence that the improvements will continue to be made in the long term. So I guess what we're really saying is, the benefits of kind of going into detail of all of these component parts is what we think is important, and what our advisors tell us is important. If you can offer better support, access more quickly. So again, I've already alluded to it. It's important that when you're selecting partners that you do get support and you do have kind of dedicated people to do that. We also need to make sure as you improve these online journeys, requests and information is processed much quicker. We had feedback recently from a firm about the kind of it was innocuous, but an ad hoc pension withdrawal, all online. Went through the process, nice and simple, and it gets through there, which meant the client was able to access their money as quickly as possible, and really think about the kind of tools that have been built within that to support that. And ultimately, I guess there's two parts. If the technology works, if the technology sings, the interface technology works, the team are there, the customer services, works well, and you have all of this combination of things in place, then in simple terms, what the provider should be giving you is less hassle and make it incredibly easy for you to do business with. So I guess in final kind of conclusion, I guess what I'm really saying is there's no right or wrong answer to choosing a platform provider. It's really about weighing up all the options for you. Some people might be the online journeys, some people it might be the customer service, some people it might be price, some people might be a particular feature of it. And I think all of them are valid ways to select a platform provider. I think what I've tried to highlight here is that platforms are slightly more very complex. They're complex businesses. They have some pressures within it. So it's really about focusing on those businesses that you believe have got answers to kind of the development, have a roadmap for development, have an ability to make sure they're making enough money to make sure there's customer service, the right customer services in play, and really give you that conviction that this is the platform provider that's for you. So I guess what we're really trying to say is it's crucial that you select the right long-term partner here, and Gavlu and the team will obviously be in touch to explain why Wealthtime believe why we believe that Wealthtime is a potential long-term partner for you, is really, I think, the kind of way to look at this. Take it all in the round. Combination of, is the interface technology great? Is the back office system working and the engine running? And is the customer service team, and the support you get of the highest level possible? They're the key factors that to think about when selecting a platform. And that's it from me.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. We will get this out to all the advisors, so hopefully some of them will have the time to listen to it. Alan, do you have any questions at all?
No, good, Mohan. That was good. Thanks, guys.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thanks, guys. What I'll do is I'll stop the recording and we can get this all out to all the rest of the advisors.
Great. Thank you very much.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.